Prime Minister Viktor Orban is our guest in the studio. Good morning. Fully greet the audience. Good morning. Regarding competitiveness, the EU has already reached the point where everyone sees the problem. However, there are debates concerning the solution. After the discussion with Macron, how likely do you think it is that a common proposal for a solution will emerge? We tend to think that we Hungarians speak frankly and directly about issues, and that's why what we say stands out a bit in the European concert. More precisely, it's only part of the truth, because if someone listens, which is not easy because, let's say, President Macron spoke at length, or read, which is also not easy, since Mr. Draghi, the former Italian Prime Minister, European Central Bank President, writes, but if someone manages to wade through these speeches and writings, they contain much stronger, dare I say, harsher statements about the state of Europe than what I usually say when talking with you. Recently, the French president gave a profound speech where he said that the European Union will simply perish or will die. If we do not immediately improve our competitiveness, we will lose our markets. Meanwhile, President Draghi wrote that if the European Union does not do something urgently, the entire European economy will run aground. So, it's clear that it's not about a peculiar Hungarian viewpoint when we talk about the difficulties of the European economy, but a shared, acknowledged opinion among leaders in their honest moments. As we often say, the king is naked, and now it's not only the Hungarian kid in the crowd who says the man is naked, but more and more people, even adults now. So the French president plays a role in forming a new European economic policy. A more competitive European economy, but how do we fit into this picture? How do I end up as the odd one out? The thing is, if someone observes the world, if you look at international news, you'll see that there's a major Eastern World Summit happening right now. It is taking place in Kazan, where the BRICS countries are meeting. So, leaders from non-Western but economically powerful countries are having a World Summit. This is the Eastern World Summit. And on November the 7th, the Western World Summit will be here in Hungary. As you can see, these two events follow each other closely in just 2 days. So there's a bit of overlap in communications. There's a formation called the European Political Community, with leaders from around 41 countries attending, including non-EU members like the British Prime Minister and the Turkish President. Then, the next day, the 27 EU country leaders will meet in Budapest. We talked about the first summit with the President, and later with the French President, focusing on the European Political Community's Western World Summit. This is because this idea is the brainchild of the French President. And since we're hosting, not only as their location, but also in terms of intellectual content, we are discussing who will speak, how they will speak, and what we will discuss. Basically, finalizing all the work groups. It's appropriate to consult with the French president, recognized as the architect of the whole idea. I did just that. If you consider that the summit's theme is economic competitiveness in Europe, we have two good reasons to meet. There might be some inconvenience in the city, as you might guess, when over 40 heads of state arrive. Traffic can slow down, but I ask at the people of Budapest to be patient and understanding, because this will truly be a Western World Summit. The timing is also quite intriguing, since it will be just 2 days after the United States elections, which could create an entirely new situation in global politics. Indeed, the matter of European competitiveness and the solutions to this challenge are interesting from a Hungarian perspective too, because just yesterday, the Employers Association representative said that the key to achieving wage growth targets is economic growth. We will talk more about the domestic situation later, but if Europe lags behind in this competitiveness race, then how can Hungary achieve such growth that makes, for example, wage increases possible? Well, if we'll discuss it later, I won't say now that we'll have a fantastic year in 2015, but maybe a bit later, like a few minutes later. But Your question is reasonable indeed, but it's also a bit of a question from the past. How did Hungarians think for a long time, myself included? We're around the time of the regime change 30 years ago. There was a ruined socialist system. The Soviet Union collapses. So does Comecon. It becomes clear that companies built in the Soviet or Soviet-dominated parts of the world are generally not competitive. The world economy is unifying, and we have to compete in the intense competition of the West. So what should we do when it turns out we've gone bankrupt? Because in the end, socialism bankrupted us. We should look at what those who are successful are doing. After that, in this global race, which was between capitalism and socialism, in the end, the capitalists won, the socialists lost. So let's adopt the market economy, which is a more elegant or more sensitive expression of capitalism, a more humane expression. Let's adopt the market economy, its institutions and methods that make them successful. We mostly accomplished this around the 1990s and the beginning of the 2000s. So the situation was relatively simple. In trouble, one looks at a successful one on the other side. A bit of an exaggeration, of course. There's no two identical shoes, no two identical feet, so there's no shoe that would fit every foot. So there are also national peculiarities, but the direction was clear. Now, however, the Western world is in trouble. So today the Western world is losing competitiveness, and we can't adopt the economic methods of the East, which now seems more successful in Hungary simply because they are Eastern worlds. Because civilizationally, culturally, they can't be copied. So even if the Chinese economy is successful, if someone goes to China, they will be amazed naturally. But if they think Hungarians can be successfully organized in the way of the Chinese economy, they are mistaken, because we are very different people here. So that's why the simple solution of looking for some successful example in the world and translating and implementing it in Hungarian is not going to work. So we need to follow our own path, because if we continue with the Westerners as we have until now, we'll end up falling into the abyss, just as President Macron said, we'll die out with the European economy. Or as President Draghi said, we'll also be stranded. The Eastern model isn't culturally applicable to us, so the only solution is to put together our own, and Hungarians are creative enough to make this work. We need to pull together examples known from around the world. A model tailored to fit Hungarians, compatible with our culture, where we feel comfortable, can perform, and can awaken our own talents. So we need to take what's good from the West, take what's good from the East, and not take anything that's not good for us, whether it's from the West or the East. For the sake of simplicity, let's describe this mindset and policy as if it's about economic neutrality, meaning Hungary needs to follow its own path. Yes, but how much room does the country have for this? Because as we saw with migration and the issue of war, there was room, although at the cost of conflicts, for pursuing a different policy. A policy divergent from the West. But now it seems the pressure is increasing about everything, that the Hungarian government should fall in line on every issue, as Cold War thinking has taken over the West since the Russian-Ukrainian war. It's like standing on a foggy hill, trapped in Cold War logic, which has also appeared in the economy. The Cold War wasn't that long ago, so there are many around the table who can recall their youthful memories, and this is when our brains revert to old models. I think bringing back the Cold War is a bad idea. But many reflexively respond this way to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Just like during the Cold War, conflicts are not only built in the realm of security, but now also in the economy with sanctions. Many sanctions affect us too, and they want to introduce new ones. Trade restrictions against China. So the question, and this is what I'm trying to talk about, is how much I feel your question hits the mark. Not that it's the question of what Hungary's space for maneuver is seems justified, because in the economy, where one might think there is more freedom and the world is more flexible, since it is an area of life built on free initiatives, even there this tariffs, duties, let's punish, exclude, hang them, please, approaches have appeared. In other words, the situation is that the Westerners don't want to end the Russian-Ukrainian war. They want to continue it with a vengeance. They want to wage war. Now, they also want to engage in economic warfare. That's why the question of whether there's room to maneuver is legitimate. Let's not speculate. Let's start from practice. You would have thought that in the Russian-Ukrainian war there is no room to maneuver. The entire European Union is singing in unison, so it seems unlikely that a country could stay out of it. And what happened? We stayed out. They are neck deep in a mess, in a losing war. They are just losing a war. Since World War II, these countries haven't lost a war, most of them, because of course the Germans lost that, but most were on the winning side in World War II. Now they are facing a new experience. They are just losing a war. Hungary did not, because this is not our war, we did not get involved. So even in such a major Western coalition, Hungary managed to stay out. Of course, if the good Lord helps us, the war advocates in America will be replaced by peace advocates, and President Trump will return. And then we can breathe a sigh of relief, because we won't be alone anymore. At least we will be two, and that's something. I don't want to call us a mouse, but let's say we are walking beside an elephant on the bridge. It does leave a different impression. What I mean is that we managed to stay out of the Russian-Ukrainian war as well. If we manage to stay out of that, then I believe we can also avoid a flawed economic policy based on warped war logic. But the kind of pressure that is said to be felt from an economic point of view, how will it manifest in the political sphere, and what can be done about it? I wouldn't like to talk about this in detail now, because this belongs to the inner workings of politics. Exactly who will twist whose ear or grab them by the neck, give them a slap. Heaven forbid blackmail them or make an offer they can't refuse, as they say. This is also a part of the political world. We often buy sausages at the store without looking into how they are made. This holds some truth when it comes to politics. The process is similar in politics. There's a power play going on there with intentions, wills, and strategies at play. You have to be smart, brave, and aware, because the cowardly fall behind and the less capable drop out. So you need to be good at politics. You have to be skilled in tough negotiations in closed back rooms. But Hungarians have never been bad at this. We have no reason to feel inferior. We hold our ground in these complex power negotiations, as shown by the state of the country since we've stayed out of the conflict, even with the new NATO Secretary General. We managed to negotiate written guarantees that during the new NATO Secretary General's term, we won't have to participate in the Ukrainian war. We managed to negotiate that while the entire European Union is distancing itself from energy sources from Russia. Hungary can still buy gas and oil. And we even fought with the Slovaks and Czechs to allow them to do it as well. We always find room to maneuver, and I believe it will be like this in the future too. It's not worth assuming that the big ones will always push us down. It's not like that. Hungary has the right to pursue its own economic policy, and if we have this right, then it's just a matter of ability, courage, and skill to use it.
We wish you a good appetite.
National consultations may assist the government in this struggle. We see emerging open forms of pressure beyond closed-door negotiations like statements or votes in the European Parliament. It's an open situation, and we couldn't expect anything different, so I don't suggest getting offended. So the EU thinks it's okay for Hungarians to continuously stay out of the war, involve banks and multinationals in public burdens, which they don't like at all, because they too pay for handling the Hungarian economic situation, or Hungarians maintain much more lively connections with the East economically than we Westerners do. No doubt about it. It's more convenient for the people in Brussels if this pebble, which we are, wasn't in their shoe. And that's why I'm not going to blow up on them. I'm simply stating the fact. A decision was made in Brussels, led by the European People's Party. See, there are parties in Brussels. The European People's Party, led by a German named Manfred Weber. The Commission is led solely by a German woman named Ursula von der Leyen. And here the plan was made, not even a secret one. It's a conspiracy against Hungary. It's an openly announced plan with two eyelets. And I dare to say this because I was there. They told it to my face. And after everyone could see on television what happened in the European Parliament, it's clear they said it to the face of the Hungarian people. They said, it's over, Mr. Prime Minister. You and your government get out. And here is the new proposed Prime Minister and the new proposed ruling party supported by us Brussels folks. This happened, so it couldn't be denied because it happened in front of the whole world. But nothing else could be expected because the same happened in Poland. The Poles also followed their own path. Carrying their own migration policy, gender issues, and an independent Polish economy. They were in tune with the West on the issue of war, but not on anything else. And the committee, along with the European People's Party, openly announced it, that the conservative Polish government should go and be replaced. That's how our friend Tusk became prime minister in Poland. Now the same scenario is for Hungary, and they are working on this. They need a puppet government. Let's speak straight. Every empire wants this. The Soviets were the same, weren't they? They also wanted a government in Hungary with strong influence. Not just influence, but full control over the government. They can't give them orders, but the Brussels folks want this. We call it a yes government. So a call comes from Brussels or Berlin and you have to say yes and carry it out. That's what they want, but I can't blame them because that's the nature of the world. I'd criticize ourselves if we let that happen because it's expected of us Hungarians to resist such pressure and not want a puppet government, puppet prime minister or puppet state instead of an independent Hungarian state and government. This isn't just a matter of power because, as you may have noticed at the start of our conversation, Brussels has disputes with Hungary over economic policy. I've compiled a list of demands from the European documents of the past few years. These are the demands against Hungary that are purely economic in nature and indicate a bitter struggle. And it would certainly cause people significant pain if we allowed it. Well, there's the issue of taxes right away. They always want to see higher taxes instead of the low Hungarian rate. Then there's the matter of taxes imposed on the multinationals. These are their multinationals. They want us to withdraw the taxes on multinationals every single time. Then they constantly attack the utility cost reduction. Brussels thinks that the system which allows us to supply gas and electricity at the lowest prices today across Europe, we offer the lowest prices for people. This is not good because a significant portion of the costs are borne by their companies. That's why they constantly write in every document to revoke this. They are pressing for pension reform. If you read these clauses, it's not pension reform, but eliminating the 13th month pension or restructuring agricultural subsidies. In Hungary, there are 160 to 170,000 farmers who receive direct support from today's European agricultural policy. They constantly want to reduce it or take it away, sometimes sending it to Ukraine or reallocating it for other purposes. So if we let go, it goes. If the Hungarian government concedes, if there's a puppet government in Hungary, the question isn't who the prime minister is, but what the consequences will be. This will have serious implications for people. So whoever is causing up to the Brussels people today, like in the government, the fact that we could see this happening live on TV means it will implement these programs no matter what is said, because its backers are now still patting its head. But if they manage to put the puppet government in power, the directives will come, and it will have to execute what Brussels wants. Sometimes Brussels wants good things, sometimes bad things. These are bad things. Today we have a government that implements good things and rejects bad things. After talking about the circumstances, let's also discuss the practical details of the new economic policy. You know, the employer said yesterday that roughly a 12% wage increase over 3 years is needed to achieve the government's target. But in return, they say development is necessary. Budgetary programs, tax, and contribution reductions. What does the government think of this? Is it possible? Is there budgetary room for maneuver? If we move from larger issues to smaller ones, the American election must be mentioned first, because what fundamentally determines the room for maneuver in economic policy is whether the war continues. expands. If President Trump returns and wins, then the risk of the war spreading will almost drop to zero. Whether he can end the war, we shall see. But the fact that the war won't extend further can almost certainly be said about a new Republican Trump-led American administration. As much as they exist in politics, sure things are never guaranteed. So that's the first thing. If this doesn't happen, then today's situation remains, where there's not only war in Ukraine, but it's constant in politics too. They say in politics, the danger of escalation, further spreading looms. It requires different economic policies, as national revenues shouldn't spend just 2% on military expenditures, but 2.5%, 3%, and some even 4% in Europe already. This means that part of the money doesn't go back into the economy, but into security, which makes sense, but it doesn't contribute to the standard of living. So it's in our elementary interest, even economically, to have an American government that says this war cannot spread further. Contain this war as it should have been done from the very start. Then it's our turn. And I think we have a fantastic opportunity because we've put together a package that can finally pull the Hungarian economy out of the tough period that's lasted since 2020. It's been a long time, few remember, but let me recall. Until 2019, the Hungarian economy was on a straight upward path, which was interrupted by COVID. After COVID came the war, sanctions, and inflation. We must find a way out of this difficult 4 to 5 year stretch, and I feel it's in place. So, if we stand on the ground of economic neutrality, then the policy we've put together from somewhere around 20, 21, 22, 25 measures is actually back to 2019 by 25. It can bring fantastic results and produce economic growth that surpasses that of any other European country, over 3% growth, which then, as we've heard in your question, comes with the possibility of wage increases. Here, employers and employees and the government come into picture. There are people who think, and I believe some of the listeners among them, that the government sets the wages. But that's not the case. Even at the end of socialism, it wasn't like that. Perhaps under communist times, but not by the late 80s. So the government cannot set the wages because if they do it wrong, it ruins the economy. How can this mistake be avoided? By having employers and employees negotiate with each other. I've always wanted to. I tried to leave the most room and freedom for them for these negotiations, and the government did not intervene in the negotiations in progress, helping if needed, but letting them reach an agreement. Because finally, on one side, there's the money, which the capital needed for investments, developments, and salaries on one side, and the work that produces value on the other. These two need to agree in a good proportion with each other. And once that's settled, the government steps in, occasionally facilitating an agreement by changing tax regulations, can alter regulations, making it easier for one side or the other. And then finally, an agreement is reached. Recently, it seems like we concluded maybe a 6-year agreement. So these are fantastic things. And now that's run its course. And I see that we can strike another long-term major deal. Negotiations between employers and employees are going well. Let's make it good. I think we'll have an average wage of 1 million forints soon, and we can raise the minimum wage to 400,000 forints in the next few years. Not in 1 year, but over several years under the annual wage agreement program. There's a good chance for this. We have little time, but let's address 2 more questions. One is that with the outlined economic policy goals, people should earn more, and we provide cheaper housing. Probably everyone agrees. Why is a national consultation necessary in this situation? The foundation for all of this needs to be strengthened, because it will have to be achieved through struggle. Earlier I mentioned what kind of economic policy Brussels wants, the kind they pursue. That's where we'd end up with them, towards a competitiveness crisis in the European economy. So this has to be fought for, defended, and represented. And for that, strength is needed. And Hungary is as big as it is. I can't refer to our military power. I can't refer to the vast Hungarian population. I can't refer to the immense Hungarian GDP. I can only refer to one thing in these struggles, the will of the Hungarian people. And if the Hungarian people say yes, economic neutrality, an independent Hungarian economic policy to start from, leading to higher growth, using the growth's resources for higher wages, and to address housing issues and building homes. If that's there, I can defend it. It gives me strength. I can stand on it. With democratic authorization, I can negotiate through the upcoming 1 or 2 difficult years. So the national consultation strengthens Hungary because it strengthens the government, it strengthens the economic policy, and the statement that we can do it isn't an empty government promise or a usual government promise, but a collective will that the government must then carry out. Remember how we created the 1 million new jobs. So everyone agreed that it would be better if there were more jobs in Hungary, but it had to be realized. It had to be done. And the first economic consultation included the steps that ultimately led us to where today everyone in Hungary who wants to work has a job. And indeed, 1 million new jobs were created. Even regarding migration, the government didn't just stop migration by itself. We were needed to, but first people said that they expect the government to stop it, that they shouldn't come here, and that it shouldn't be Brussels deciding who we live with, because we will decide that. This gave a strong foundation to the government's policy, which could then be enforced through thick and thin. Since you mentioned migration, let's touch on it briefly, because this week the agency consulted with the President and the Slovak Prime Minister on this matter and said that the Migration Pact should be thrown out. But meanwhile, the majority in the European Parliament voted for it to take effect as soon as possible. What are the forces that support migration against what could be said to be the majority of member states? Well, what happened is that the Brussels bureaucrats, backed by a few larger states, said that the Migration Pact is good and needs to be expedited. Unfortunately, except for our homeland, the Hungarian opposition also voted in favor. In addition to punishing Hungary, the border protection support that Hungary was entitled to was denied. Our homeland and the Fidesz KDNP fought well, but we weren't enough in the European Parliament. Perhaps we will be more successful in the Council, where I am. The situation is that the struggle continues between pro-migration and anti-migration forces. The balance is shifting in our favor, so there is hope here too. Prime Minister Viktor Orban was a guest in our studio, not recommended for children under 12. Advertisement.